Hi, everyone. Good morning. I welcome you for attending this webinar. My name is Muthukrishnan Ranganathan, but as you see on the screen, my nickname is Renji. I'm a senior study director and I'm based in St. Charles, Missouri, at EurofinsDiscovery. Our main focus in cardiac safety, and we've been, today I will be talking to you about the title for the talk is a totality of evidence approach for comprehensive evaluation of cardiovascular safety liabilities. So as you can see, I have mentioned cardiovascular instead of cardiac safety. So I will walk through the slide and what we have been doing for the last few years and what we are planning to do for the vascular safety. For the last few years, we've been focused on cardiac safety, working with the FDA. And for this year onwards, we are working on the vascular safety. As we know, the cardiovascular is not only the heart, but all other, the veins and the other things that are part of the cardiovascular safety. So with that introduction, I'm going to move to the next slide. And so the outline for my talk is preclinical cardiovascular safety is the talk, is the main topic, but I'm going to divide that into two. Cardiac, which is mainly focused on cardiac ion channels, and then the vascular safety. So in the cardiac ion channels, we have the CiPA 7. We've been working with the FDA for the last 5-6 years, and we have characterized the CiPA 7 in automated platform, in QPADs and MouthCube, and with the recent guidelines and then question and answers from the FDA for ICH S7B and U14, there is an emphasis on measuring all cardiac channels at physiologic temperature. What do we mean by physiologic temperature? It's the body temperature. So the heart, behaves completely differently at physiologic temperature than at room temperature. People who work with the heart, they will know very well. And as soon as the temperature is cooled down, the heart starts beating. So we can see why FDA is recommending, to record this initial activity of the CiPA 7, NaV1.5, calcium 1.2, HERG, and Kv4.3, and lead sodium current, casein chemic, and then Q2.1 at physiologic temperature, because when you do the non-clinical assay, till 4 or 5 years back, they used to do it, at room temperature, unless it is in GLP, then they do it at physiologic temperature. Now, FDA is emphasizing, even at a high throughput format, it's better to do at physiologic temperature. So I'll be talking to you about the NaV1.5 and the calcium 1.2 and the HERG at physiologic temperature. The assay we have done, and so safety data too. And as we speak, we are doing the other CiPA 4, validating at 37, and we plan to save the data in second quarter of 2023. And CiPA has 4 buckets. People who are very familiar with the CiPA guidelines, you have to look at the ion channel and then do the in silico modeling. And third one is the cardiomyocyte, using the cardiomyocyte to verify the effects that we see in the cardiac channel. So I'll be talking quite briefly about the iPSC cardiomyocyte obtained from Fujifilm, and then the ME assay. And lately, in the last, I will be talking to you about the vascular safety, what we are thinking about, how we are going to approach it, because American Congress has passed FDA Modernization Act 2 last year, which no longer requires new drugs to undergo animal testing before human trials. This is one of the mandates from Congress that start using in vitro assays instead of using animals for drug testing. So here we're going to show the thrombosis and vascular safety toxicity using human biomarker assays will fill the void, and how we are going to be doing validating the assay. I'll briefly talk about and what we are doing, what kind of drugs we are using to test this. So, just a brief introduction for the cardiac safety. In the late 90s, several drugs were, and early 80s to late 90s and early 90s, and a little bit of part of the 2000s, there were several drugs withdrawn. This is the name of the drug, and then the therapeutic area and the year withdrawn. And you can see most of these drugs were withdrawn in the late 90s and early 2000s. And except the top two drugs, all of them are not cardiac related. These are non-cardiac drugs, but they somehow interacted with the cardiac and caused global safety issues. And so, so Norman Stockbridge, who is the divisional director in FDA for cardiac and renal safety, after 20 years of spending on the department, he asked the question by writing a review dealing with the global safety issues. Was the response to T2 liability of non-cardiac drugs well coordinated? So basically, he's asking, all right, we stop all these drugs, a part of them are withdrawn from the market, but then we introduced some of the guidelines in 2003 around this time, and how is it behaving? And that was the summary he wrote, or the review wrote, and this is listed here in this literature, cited here. Next slide. So this is the evolution of cardiac safety guidelines for drug development in the ion channel view. As we talked about in the previous slide, during the 1990s, several key drugs were withdrawn due to arrhythmia and Torsades de Pont. And that's why the FDA and the other global regulators introduced the two guidelines, ICH S7B for non-clinical and U14 for the clinical guidelines. And we were the first one around 2005, using Quad-4 high-throughput platform. We screened the cardiac age for the cardiac safety, but at that time it was at room temperature. So the ICH S7B and U14 used two biomarkers, in other words, the surrogate endpoints, human go-go related gene herd block or QT prolongation. These biomarkers were highly sensitive, but not very specific for predicting arrhythmia risk. And then during the 10-year review, FDA invited all the big pharma and some opinion leaders from the CiPA consortium. And what is it CiPA about? It is a new paradigm for assessment of potential for clinical torsade that is not measured exclusively by potency herd block and irrespective of QT prolongation. And so the idea is they want to get away from only focusing on herd block and then just not focus on irrespective of QT prolongation and look at some other methods or parameters or biomarkers. So the evolution of CiPA came across in 2022 with the revised ICH S7B integrated risk assessment to gain an understanding of relationship between preclinical assays and clinical effects to improve the value of QT investigations. So before, let's say 4 years back, the clinical, the ICH S7B was guidelines were only used to take the drugs to first in human studies. And once it goes to first in human, then the V14 takes over, and then the V14 will not, follow or ignore completely the ICH S7B guidelines. So, so during these annual review, after 10 years of review or 20 years of review, that there was a back and forth between the non-clinical and clinical, and they found the value of preclinical assay. Now they're emphasizing that to even do the QT investigations, you need to take into account preclinical assays to disseminate humans as a way forward for the integrated risk assessment. So with that, there came a question about, okay, the preclinical assays, the preclinical assays, it means the ion channels are done at room temperature. So we need to be focusing on doing at physiologic temperature. So it should be done at 37 degrees Celsius. So that is the guideline, right now, person at 37, the assay all the ion channels at 37. We have used the Cube 384 Heatherton platform to characterize the CPRO core, what we call as the Melbourne calcium and herd currents, because these are the core of the cardiac action potential, to first bring it to the market. And then as we are validating the CPRO full as we speak, to bring it to the second quarter of 2023. Here, this slide summarizes the challenge of, the drug discovery. So the main focus is we don't want to withdraw drugs post-approval, because, even 20 years back, we used to take 12 years and $1 billion. Now it takes, still may happen in 10, 12 years, but the amount of money it takes to bring the drug out is gone up at a bit higher, like 1.5, 1.6 billion. So you don't want too much money, after you bring the drug to the market and then withdraw. So money and time waste. The other thing is, you don't want to miss out good drugs by the hERG signal. Because why do we say that? There are numerous molecules in even hERG prolong the QT interval and action potential duration, and carry an extremely low risk of performance upon. Many of these drugs are in clinical use as we speak, including amiodarone, quetiapine, ranolazine, fluoxetine, and phenobarbital. So the ranolazine and fluoxetine, they block sodium lake current and calcium current in addition to the hERG current. So if you just use the guidelines that was introduced in 2003, fluoxetine and ranolazine will fail, by just looking at the hERG signal. Fluoxetine is a Prozac and from the drug company from Lilly, and it makes billions, tens of billions of dollars per year for the fluoxetine. We could have made a good drug, just focusing on the hERG signal. And so that's a whole idea about the CiPA guidelines. Don't focus on hERG. Focus on, at least hERG, sodium current, and calcium. And before you go to the GLP or you go to the first in human, look up all CiPA-7 currents. Just as an integrated risk assessment before going into a human or clinical study. So we've been using Cube for the last 2.5 years, and from Sophia, it's a high-throughput screening system. It's a Cube 384 because it uses a 384 plate format, and also uses 384 amplifiers that provide individual and adaptive touchpoint recording to ensure tighter data distribution to reliable and more predictive results. Accordingly, the assay temperature can be set at any desired level and kept constant. Cube 384 offers complex ion channel interrogation with high fidelity recordings, accurate electrical handling, and attended operation, and robust statistical power, and at a competitive price. And the other thing is that once you start the assay, for example, at 37 degrees Celsius, it's locked in, and until the assay is done, nobody can change the assay temperature. This is the good safety mechanism and the good mechanism I like in the Cube. So this is a couple of publications that we worked with the FDA out of that collaboration came out. That what we have contributed to the CiPA consortium is to harmonize the voltage protocols so that when the regulators review the cardiac safety studies, they can review more quickly and across submissions due to harmonized voltage protocol. And and then we can assess the risk assessment in an integrated way of both non-clinical and clinical data that provides a totality of evidence approach with the non-clinical and clinical data. And the non-clinical data inform late-phase clinical trial design and labeling for market application. This is very important because it reduces the number of thorough QT or QTC clinical studies, and it reduces the cost and improves safety of your drug when it goes to the first in human. So in this slide, I'm giving the salient features of ICS E14 SMP question and answers from March 2022, specifically QO 2.1 for S7P, that specifically focuses on recording temperature. So the recording temperature can impact per current inhibition and has been reported for several molecules, including erythromycin. And this publication came out of a Chantis, when I was in Chantis working with curves, as well as Hu et al., 2004-2005. And the IC50 value of erythromycin at 42 degree room temperature is 7 times higher than at physiological, near physiological temperature, that is at 35 degrees Celsius. And the second point is the elevated recording temperature can lead to both increases and decreases in herd IC50 values in a test article specific manner. There's also a couple of three publications came out of it, and these are listed here, actually 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, but there is no direct method to predict physiological temperature IC50 values based on temperature research. There is no in silico modeling to predict. So therefore, FDA recommends the recording temperature to be at near physiological temperature, 35 to 37, in order to predict the test article's impact on ion channels in the clinical setting. In the clinical setting, the temperature is 37, so that's why they want to do the assays at physiological temperature for the ion channels. So here I'm showing the characterization of the CiPA herd assay at physiological temperature on Q. Why do we call CiPA herd assay? This is, we are eliciting the herd current using the CiPA protocol, that's the red line, and holding it minus 80, depolarization to plus 40, and then hold at plus 44 half a second, and then depolarizing back to minus 80 quickly. So as you can see, there is when the depolarization is applied, there is an activation and inactivation of the herd current, and when we repolarize it back, the inactivation is removed, and then you can see a sudden jump in the tail currents. This is one of the salient features of herd, and that's how it contributes to the repolarization part of the cardiac action potential due to these unique biophysical characteristics of this herd channel. And here on the left side, we are showing the IT plot for vehicle control. The peak current measured at the tail and the lead current just at holding at minus 80. And then you can see that, the triangles at the top, that's on the y-axis, and the right side of the y-axis, the recording temperature. So each valve we get is the lead current recording and the peak current recording, as well as the temperature of the recording for the continuous experiment. And you can see that you're waiting for about 5 minutes to reach the steady state. The count is very stable. And then when you apply two liquid applications of vehicle control, I will say in a minute why we apply in two. The time duration for the two applications is about a total of 5 minutes. And then here I'm showing U4031, which is a sticky compound, and it acts slowly also. So as you can see, during the first application, the inhibition is slow, not much faster. But at the same concentration, when they apply it twice, then you can see these kind of inhibition speeds up, and it is more at the end of the totality of 5 minutes. It's almost like 50% inhibition. So we use the IC50 value for E4031 around 50 to 80 nanomolar on smooth. And so if I use the first application, IC50 will be less compared to the second application. So since we don't know the customers or your compound is going to be slow acting or sticking, that's why for all applications, we do two dual application of the vehicle as well as the dual application of the compound. And we do only one concentration assay for physiological temperature with the integrity and the robustness of the assay. So it's very good and very tight. As you can see, the leak is very steady and the current is very steady too. And here is the two compounds that shows the temperature difference. here in this, on the left hand is the clarithromycin, the 6-point dose response, and the dotted line is the upper and lower 90% confidence interval, and that value is given here, 45 micromolar, and the dose, the confidence interval range is the lower is 9.9 and the upper is 70 micromolar. And for the room temperature, the IC50 value was close to 400 micromolar, and so the same way for DL-sotalol, you can see the IC50 value at physiological temperature is 500, and the 92% confidence is 420 to 645. At room temperature, at the highest concentration around, 3 millimolar, we saw about 20 or 30% inhibition. We didn't see any inhibition, much higher inhibition at room temperature, so we did not estimate it. So here I'm showing the characterization of the CiPA now 1.5 peak sodium current at physiological temperature on Q/pound. And again, why do we call it CiPA now 1.5? Because we're using the CiPA now 1.5 current protocol, which we optimized with the CiPA consortium. And whoever works with sodium 1.5, they know at minus 18 millivolt Bremton potential, 50% of the channels are inactivated. So you need to step back to negative 120 for briefly about 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds to activate, to recover from inactivation into closed configuration. So all of them will be available to activation at this potential. So during the depolarization step to plus 40, there is a brief interval at minus 15, because that's where the peak sodium current occurs. And as you can see here, this is the peak sodium current, and that's the leak of the sodium current, and that's the plateau phase. And because the sodium current is completely inactivated during the plateau phase, you don't see any, tail current or any other repolarization current during the repolarization phase. Unless your compound activates the late sodium current, in that case, we keep an eye on this and we monitor this current here, and then we will report, during the evolution of sodium peak current, we saw some indication of the drug activating late sodium current, which is not good for the drug development. So we have to be very proactive in saying these things to our customer. And on the right-hand side, we're showing the IT plot for the way to control peak and leak and temperature are monitored. Here, as I mentioned, the leak current is monitored here and the peak current. And so you can see the leak and the temperature is almost like overlaid here. And the y-axis here says is about 36, 37 here. And the y-axis here is the peak current. And we are the steady state. We wait for 5 minutes to reach the steady state. We apply to dual application of the vapor control and dual application of the positive control. In this case, 1 millimolar tetracaine that completely blocks. And people may ask questions: why is such a huge current, like almost 50 nanoampere? Because we are using a population test, a 10 multi-hole plate for the Cube platform, where 10 cells are monitored all at the same time in the well to have a very robust current and see a robust inhibition. And excuse me. And we have tested all CiPA 28 compounds on this at room temperature, as well as at the physiological temperature. And for the sake of time and clarity, I'm just showing only the few compounds that are showing, some data for some of the compounds here, except vandatanib and most of the other compounds like clozapine, droperidone, ranitidine, primazide. They are all more or less the same, and maybe a little bit sensitive to the physiological temperature than at room temperature. But vandatanib, at 1 micromolar, the top concentration in blocked almost 100%, and the IC50 value was close to 0.14 micromolar, and we couldn't believe our eyes. So we were, we are trying to test this, a couple of times, and we ran out of the drug, and we are getting more fresh drugs, and we are testing again to make sure that this is highly reproducible. We have done twice, and then we have checked 4 times to make sure this is highly reproducible. And you can see the IC50 values, they are more or less similar for the values in the literature report. And the 94% confidence range also is very tight, as you can see with the dotted intervals on the solid line. So it is a very robust assay at physiological temperature for 9.5. So my whole background is on now 1.5, and most of the time I have recorded at room temperature. So I was a little bit apprehensive that whether we can be able to plot this current at physiological temperature. It was so beautiful. The currents were more stable than ever, even at the room temperature. So I really like it, and it is much better assay than at room temperature. And here comes the characterization of the CiPA calcium 1.2 peak current assay. Again, in the CiPA current, because we are using the CiPA recommended protocol, we are holding at -80 and then stepping back to -90, to recover from inactivation. And then we depolarize to +30, and then held there for about 300 milliseconds for at 40 millivolts. And you can see the peak current activating when we're stepping at 0 millivolt briefly before going to +30 millivolts. And that's the calcium, as you can see. And that's after applying nifedipine, the blocked current. And you can also see the calcium current, they inactivate. Unlike the sodium current, this inactivation is slow and it's not 100% inactivated. So when you repolarize the membrane potential to -80, you can see the tail current, the busted tail current coming back. So what we are thinking, we are also measuring the tail current for some of the compounds that can be more sensitive to the state-dependent inhibition. So I will talk briefly in the next slide what I mean by that. But here on the right-hand side, which is control, the peak current, not the tail current, only the peak current and the leak current, as well as the temperature monitored. So here we are applying 2 vehicle control of a 5 minutes duration. Actually, it's a little bit longer here. And then the 2 vehicle, and then we apply 1 additional nifedipine. So the nifedipine, if you measure the peak current, there is some current still left. But if you look at the tail current, it's almost 100% blocked. But see here, I'm only presenting peak current, and that's why you see this current being here. So as I mentioned, looking at the nifedipine data, the tail current, more like the state-dependent inhibition, even at the lowest concentration, it blocked 80% of the current at 300 nanomolar. But if you look at the peak current, the IC50 is around 1 micromolar, value. And these are the 2 other positive controls we used in this chlorpromazine and prednisone. They are more or less close to the manual patch count literature values. And with the 90% confidence interval given here for the chlorpromazine prednisone, and not for nifedipine, because at 80% block we can determine the IC50 value. So since again this is a 1 concentration value, these are very robust and very steady assays with no current rundown. So here is the summation of all the assays that we talked about. The now 1.5 sodium channel assay at with 1 concentration and 6 concentration with this catalog number, calcium 106 with this concentration. The difference between 1 and 6 is no DR and DR. In the same way for her, for 1 or 6 is no DR or DR, and PHYS reminds us of the physiological temperature assay. And this is the YEMI assay. We've been using this for the last 5-6 years at physiologic temperature. As I briefly mentioned, the cardiomyocytes don't peak if the temperature is not at 37. And we use a specific blocker, sodium channel blocker, mexilotine. In this case, for calcium channel, E40 from red channel blocker. The black is the control black tracers. And the red tracers and the markers are the amplitude change as well as the actual traces after application of the blocker for sodium and calcium and herd. And after sodium channel application, the spike amplitude decreases tremendously. And in the calcium channel blocker, the field potential duration shortens so much, almost 50 to 40, 60% decrease. And herd channel with the E4031, the increase is about 200% increase, as we expect for these blockers. And this is a scatter plot for these values, and to show the 90% confidence interval for the beat period and field potential duration and corrected field potential duration and spike amplitude. And you can see the E4031, the beat period increases because it delays the repolarization. And you can see the field potential increases, and they're also still there when you correct for the field potential duration. On the other hand, mexilotine, not much change except on the spike amplitude. And whereas the DIF-DSM, you can see it reduces the beat period as well as the field potential duration and the corrected field potential duration, as well as increases the spike amplitude. And the vehicle control, more or less the same, except in the spike amplitude, we do see some scattering due to the spike amplitude because we used to change the media, and immediately measure within 30 minutes. And that used to have some scatter in the vehicle, the spike amplitude. And lately, Fujifilm has said, just change the media the day before and then measure the vehicle control, in the measurement, measurements, the first of the day, and then change the media to control and positive controls, and then measure the effect of drugs and the ME parameters. And so that way, the data is still, all other data are getting very tight, except this, the spike amplitude. And I have talked to people around, they also said that they do see the same thing. Now I'm switching back to the vascular. So far I had talked about cardiac safety, and we know the cardiovascular system only not depends on the cardiac, it also depends on the vascular. I have shown some evidences of number of drugs withdrawn for cardiac safety. Similarly, for vascular safety, for around 2009, Y-Ax, Blackstraw has been drawn, and the tipical was also been drawn around 2012 or 13, when I was working in BI. And then thrombosis, and so we are focusing on thrombosis and vascular toxicity of these drugs that were withdrawn. So, because these are the factors that are contributing to the vascular toxicity. The nice to looking at the thrombosis and vascular toxicity. We can also look at skin irritation, skin rash, and skin sensitization, acute toxicity, immune suppression, and liver and organ toxicity in our biomap diversity class, phenotypic profile. And this is going to be a very good next or a step when the lower level of animal models are, or I should say the higher level of animal models are not used for non-clinical testing. And so I'm meaning the dogs and the monkeys and all the animal agencies are going away from the higher version of the animals. At that time, our biomap toxicity signature profiles will be very, very handy for safety and toxicity profiling. So we already started working on this. We have lots and tons of data on this, but now I am, using some specific withdrawn drug on this thrombosis and vascular toxicity to collect some more data. So we know that the biomap mechanisms of safety and toxicity mechanisms, and then it can identify molecules with the pharmacology and toxicity signatures with an increased risk of adverse events So that way you can prioritize against the likelihood of adverse effect. That will lead to the safer lead candidates for your drug discovery program. So how did we go about this? We pulled the human cell types and tissues from 4 healthy donors, and then we put the cells with some stimuli, normal cells, into disease models. For example, the 3C into vascular biology using linear endothelial cells, CASM3C into cardiovascular inflammation using coronary artery smooth muscle cells, and then HDL3CG and healing for using renal biofibrinogens. So the last column shows what are we measuring. These are the protein endpoints, clinically relevant biomarkers that reflect cell health, and as well as the activation status of cytokines, chemokines, surface receptors, or very specific vascular, cardiovascular biomarkers. So for all these 3 types of assay, we look at the total cytotoxicity in addition to looking at the proliferation of, the cytokines, chemokines, and then there are some general markers like MCP1, PKM1, TMTF, and all of that. But then there are some very specific ones like L-cytokine, HLA-DR, and other stuff that are very specific for each of these assays. So that way, we are giving a totality of the cell cytotoxicity in addition to specific biomarkers for human drug compounds. So this is a summary of how we have made this assay very robust and strong. So we used more than 4,500 drugs on these in these different cell types, using different biomarkers specific for some profiling, like it's the vascular, cardiovascular profile. And then we compare these biomarker profiles of the drugs with the same clinical adverse effect. And when you overlay that, there are some key predictive toxicity signatures come out. And that are tested for statistical as well as biological significance. And that way we identify, okay, these are the signatures for, say, vascular toxicity. And that way we can map known targets and pathways to discover mechanism. And that signatures is predictive of the clinical outcomes. And that our colleague has published this paper a few years back, and there is literature is cited here for you to go back and look at it. And in the summary, I have talked about the use of high throughput ion channel screening, along with in vitro toxicity testing and translational models, like Biomap platform offers a complete evolution of cardiovascular safety. You are measuring the cardiac safety using the CiPA-7 cardiac ion channel assay to find out the mechanism, the 4 buckets: ion channel modeling, verify the MEA, and then look on the clinical. And we have been validating, we have validated the 1.3 and calcium 1.2, and we heard with the CiPA-28 compounds. As we speak, we are validating the other 4 channels at physiological room temperature. And then it will be published as a full white paper to the customers to showcase the data. And right now, as we speak, we are collecting data for Viax and Baxtra and celecoxib for thrombosis and vascular toxicity. In addition, we're also looking at the CiPA-7. So we will probably in the next KSPS meeting, we will be probably giving an update on this, assays together summarized. So with that, I'm going to take Diane, our site manager, who encouraged me to do all this creative work and to bring, more assays for drug safety screening, specifically for cardiovascular safety. And I'm going to thank my colleague Andy Cook, another study director, and Jennifer Wesley is the supervisor, and Darcy Jiang is the senior scientist, and for Makoto-san for organizing this meeting, as well as Hana and then Coma Biotech for organizing this meeting and our webinar. And you can see all these material in the EurofinsDiscovery solution and cardiovascular disease, and also you can reach me directly to my email. So with that, I conclude my talk. And if you have any question, I can answer.